All right, welcome back to the Artist Connection podcast. This is Matt Kasar with today's special guest, the always charming Mr. Stephen Bishop.
Hello.
So honored to have you here, my friend. You would not believe how long I've been listening to your music, and I have a few of the vinyl albums right in front of me. Some relics from your past.
Oh boy, that old vinyl thing. There's a lot said about it back then, but there's a vinyl shortage coming up, and I'm really worried.
Yeah.
Now that's what they came out with like years and years ago to make records cost more money and to charge more. They made up this whole vinyl shortage thing, back then in the early '80s.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I've been buying records myself since the late '70s, and you're right. The price has been consistently the same that whole time. Or unless you go to the mall, of course, the mall stores always charged a lot more. But yeah, it never comes down, no matter what the technology is. Even if I download something that's not a physical copy, I'm still paying the same amount. It's very strange.
I'm not to the level of buying long-playing albums. I've got a whole bunch in my garage. That just collecting dust. But I have to admit, CDs are so much more, easily available and just easy to work with because they're small and everything. But when you think about it, what if Sergeant Pepper had come out now, on a CD and you try and read see all the people on the cover,
Yep.
and it would be so small. It's a shame that the art form of album art forms as an art form that disappeared, with the advent of CDs.
Yeah, it never truly recovered either. I mean, sometimes we have bands now that are putting things out on vinyl and they're reissuing older titles on vinyl, and I missed it. I personally missed it a lot. That's why I hung on to my collection, and that's why I still go to a local record store every weekend and dig in those piles of vinyl and see what I could find.
I know people now. I guess they just are satisfied enough just to hear the music, from iTunes and stuff, which is great. I love iTunes.
Sure.
But still, the old days of reading the credits and looking at who played on the album and all the little creative things that artists put on there. It's a shame because it's just not the same on CD.
Well, I'll tell you though, I'm looking at your first record, which we'll get to, Careless. I want to talk about the new one first, but the combination of looking at your old versus your new, even though the format has shrunk, you can tell that you're a guy that matters to, because you still do list your musicians. You still do list, you have a collage of different people you've either worked with or friends or family or whoever they are. I don't know who they all are. I see you there with Johnny Carson there in your Best of Bish album cover jacket, right? The tiger stripe. Right. But it's cool that you do that. I mean, you take the time to tell us who's on each track, and you do share those photos. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I try and give as much, to the listener as possible, for information.
Yeah, I love it. So the new record, of course, is Be Here Then, your first new release in, 7 years now?
Yeah, I did. The last album was, I worked with the incredible guitarist, Oscar Castro Neves. He was the original guitarist that you hear playing, like on the radio when you hear, like, you're eating at a really nice restaurant, and all of a sudden you hear Quiet Nights and Quiet Stars. That's him on guitar.
Wow.
From back then with Astrid Gilberto. But I mean, he played all the guitar on this album that I did called Romance in Rio. The name before that was Saudade, which means longing in Portuguese.
Huh.
But I'm really proud of that album. It came out great. Peter Bonetta did it with him, with me, and it really came out great. Except, it went wood. It didn't go gold. It went wood. It just, nobody really heard it.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, obviously, since the time you first started recording to now, the industry has changed probably a dozen times.
Oh yeah, very much.
So 7 years ago, that was probably in that sweet spot of, the internet was still there, but marketing and reaching a fan base and potentially reaching a new fan base was probably a lot more primitive than now.
It's really difficult now. It's just too many artists, too many CDs out there, and then people just don't have the same enthusiasm about, you know, buying CDs as they do about, you know, digital.
Yeah.
It's just huge digital, which is, you know, fine. It's good. You know, I made sure that digitally this album would sound good, really good. But I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's just the music business has really changed.
Yeah, I mean, just as a fan and as a consumer of music, there's so many different options. But like you said, there's so much out there that even when I like an artist, or even when I'm a fan of somebody, that new release can slip through the cracks because there's so much other stuff kind of grabbing your attention, and it might be a little more fleeting. I mean, some of the stuff I hear today, I'm probably not going to be listening to in 40 years, but you know, it's still there. It's still grabbing your attention, and you know, it competes.
Yeah, it does compete. The problem is so much music. You know, it's like fast food music. Some of the music that's on the radio is just like, you know, it gives you the hook, and you know, but it doesn't last. It doesn't have you know, lasting quality of, you know, are you going to be listening to this like 5 years from now?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's a funny thing like that. But I'm pretty happy with this album, this Be Here Then album. I mean, people ask me why I called it Be Here Then, and now I say I have a reply for that. It's you know, when the Beatles, it's common knowledge that when John Lennon was approached by a man with a flaming pie, and he said, "You will be Beatles with an A," Beatles with an A. And John Lennon said, "All right, I'll do it." And and so that same man showed up at my house all these years later at the door, and of course I threw some water on him because he had a flaming pie. And then after I did that, he said, "You will call your album Be Here Then."
Well, you can't argue with that. I mean, that's just...
That's right. I remember the same man. The flaming pie. I think it was rhubarb.
I love in your bio how it talks about, and you're at that perfect age, and it's an age I envy, where you're growing up in the 50s when rock and roll is brand new, and nobody really knows what to make of it at that point. And then you're a teenager in the 60s, in the early 60s, and the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Tell me about those times. I mean...
Well, I was just telling my wife last night, I was saying, you know, people sometimes say, what are the things that you're grateful for? You know, I'm really grateful to have lived, to have been a teenager right at the right time with the Beatles.
The perfect time.
And for me, the Buffalo Springfield were a big band.
Absolutely.
I loved the Buffalo Springfield. And, you know, it just was, timing-wise, it couldn't have been better. You know, it just, I loved that whole era in the 60s with Motown and the advent of the singer-songwriter, you know, emerging, and, you know, the British invasion and all that. I mean, they just had that great special on Day of Quart 5 last night, which was really fun. You know, I just really thought that was the cream of the crop for me, for music. I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's ever been that nourished, you know, in the 60s and early 70s. It's just so many great records, so many classic albums.
And it was all brand new. I mean, now we still obviously have good stuff, but it's a lot of times it's variations of a theme. Like you listen to it and think, oh yeah, okay, that's great, but I think I heard that before, you know, that kind of thing. But back then, you must have just been, your ears, especially as a musician, you were assaulted with so many different sounds and unique things hitting you, unique ideas at any time. I mean, it must have been amazing.
Well, I mean, what artist? I mean, I hate to, you know, pound the Beatles,
yeah,
you know, horn, you know, because it's there's certainly enough Beatleholics around. But I mean, they were just. I mean, what artist could you, like? Everybody was waiting for the next album, like, you know, with bated breath kind of thing, and never disappointed with the next album. It was always like, oh my God, you know, this is incredible.